Fire feels obvious, but that's the trap. Fire feels like one of the simplest things in the world. You don't need to be taught what it is. You see it as a child and immediately understand two things. It's warm, and you shouldn't touch it. That feels like knowledge, solid, reliable knowledge. But that confidence is exactly the problem. Fire is so familiar that we stop asking questions about it. We treat it like a thing, something that exists on its own, like a rock or a chair. You say the fire is hot. You say the fire burned the wood. You say put out the fire. That language makes fire sound like an object, something with substance, something you could, in principle, point to and say, that's fire. But try doing that, try to grab a piece of fire. There's nothing there to hold, and yet something very real is happening. Something energetic enough to reshape metal, light up cities, and erase forests. So what exactly are we talking about when we talk about fire? This is where intuition quietly misleads you, because fire looks like matter. It has shape. It has motion. It seems to occupy space, and it behaves in ways we normally associate with living things. It grows. It spreads, it consumes. That's not an accident. Your brain is very good at mistaking processes for objects. It does it all the time. A wave in the ocean isn't a thing, but it looks like one. A traffic jam isn't a physical object, but you can point to it on a map. Fire belongs in that same category. But your instincts don't want to hear that yet. Your instincts want fire to be something solid and dangerous, because that's the safest assumption to make if you're a human trying to survive. Evolution doesn't reward accuracy. It rewards caution. So you grow up with a picture of fire that feels complete until you slow down and ask a very uncomfortable question. What is fire actually made of? Not wood. The wood is there before the fire, not smoke. Smoke comes after, not heat. Heat isn't a substance. Not light escapes immediately. So if you strip all of that away, what's left? Here's the unsettling part. If you watch a flame carefully, nothing stays in one place. The shape is never the same. The colors shift. The brightness changes. It's there. And then it isn't replaced by something that looks similar but isn't the same at all. That's not how objects behave. Objects persist. Processes don't. And yet your language, your instincts, and your gut all insist on treating fire as if it were a thing. That mismatch between what fire feels like and what it actually is where the confusion begins. Because once you stop calling fire a thing, a lot of strange questions disappear, and a much stranger set of questions takes their place. If fire isn't matter, if it isn't energy by itself, if it isn't something you can isolate, then why does it feel so real? Why does it command so much attention? And why does something that isn't even a thing have the power to change everything it touches? To answer that, you have to let go of the idea that fire exists the way you think it does. And that's where things start getting interesting. Fire is not a thing. It's an event. Let's take away the poetry for a moment and look at what's actually happening. When you light a match, nothing new is being created. No mysterious substance suddenly appears. The match doesn't release fire the way a box releases a toy. What happens instead is far stranger and far more ordinary. You are triggering a rearrangement. The atoms in the match were already there. The oxygen in the air was already there. They were just sitting around minding their own business, quite content in their original arrangements. Then you strike the match. That tiny spark gives some of those atoms enough energy to break old bonds and form new ones. And when those new bonds form, something crucial happens. Energy is released not as a solid, not as a fluid, not as a thing you can scoop up. It's released as motion, as vibration, as light, and as more heat. That released energy then bumps into nearby atoms, giving them enough energy to rearrange as well. And that triggers the same process again. And again, and again. What you are watching in a flame is not an object. It's a chain reaction, a self-sustaining sequence of microscopic events, each one making the next one possible. The flame exists only as long as that sequence continues. The moment the sequence breaks, the fire vanishes. Instantly. That's why fire is so hard to hold. There is nothing to contain. You can't bottle a reaction that depends on constant motion and constant rearrangement. This is why fire has no fixed shape. The shape you see is just the region where atoms are actively changing partners fast enough to glow. Move the air slightly and the pattern shifts. Change the fuel and the color changes, remove the oxygen, and the entire show stops. No oxygen, no rearrangement, no rearrangement, no energy release, no fire, simple, brutal, unforgiving. And here's where intuition gets it wrong again. We say fire uses up the fuel, as if fire is eating it. But that's backwards. Fire isn't consuming anything. The atoms aren't being destroyed, they're being rearranged into more stable combinations. Carbon becomes carbon dioxide, hydrogen becomes water vapor. The atoms leave the flame quietly, having given up some energy along the way. Fire doesn't eat matter, it sheds energy. That energy escapes as heat and light, racing away from the reaction as fast as physics allows. That's why a flame needs a constant supply of new fuel. The energy doesn't stick around, it leaks out immediately, so fire survives only by continuously triggering itself. It's a process that exists on the edge of collapse, too cold, and it dies. Too little oxygen, and it dies. Too little fuel, and it dies. Fire is not a thing that persists. It's something that happens. And the most surprising part is this. Once you see fire this way, it stops being special. Not less beautiful, just less mysterious, because the same logic applies everywhere. Rust is fire that happens slowly. Your body is fire that learned to regulate itself. The Sunday is fire playing by nuclear rules instead of chemical ones. Different scales, different rules, same underlying idea. Energy moving downhill toward more stable arrangement. Fire isn't an object invading matter, it's matter relaxing. And the only reason it looks dramatic is because it's happening fast enough for your eyes to notice. Heat, light, and the illusion of substance. Now let's talk about what you actually see when you look at a flame, because this is where your senses really betray you. When you stare at fire, you think you're looking at the fire itself. That seems obvious. The bright part must be the thing, right? But that bright part is already the aftermath. What you're seeing is energy on its way out. The heat you feel is atoms vibrating faster because they were struck by escaping energy. The light you see is energy leaving atoms after being briefly stored in excited states. Known of that is the fire. It's what the fire leaves behind. Imagine watching a crowd exiting a stadium and mistaking the crowd for the game. The game already happened. What you're seeing is the consequence. That's fire. By the time light reaches your eyes, the chemical rearrangement that caused it is already over. The atoms have moved on. The reaction has advanced elsewhere. You never see the fire itself. You see the bookkeeping. This is why flames can look solid, even though they aren't. Your brain stitches together billions of tiny energy releases into a continuous picture, just like it does with a movie made of still frames. But slow it down enough, and the illusion falls apart. A flame isn't filled with glowing stuff. It's mostly empty space, with brief flashes of excited atoms popping in and out of existence. The brightness comes from transitions, not from material. That's why different flames have different colors. It's not because the fire is dyed. It's because different atoms release energy in different ways. Sodium gives you yellow, copper gives you green, hydrogen gives you a pale blue that's almost invisible in daylight. The color is a signature, not of fire, but of the atoms involved. So when you say, this fire is hotter, what you're really saying is, more energy is being released per s-econd. When you say, this fire is brighter, you're saying, more atoms are being excited and relaxing. When you say, this fire is bigger, you're saying, the reaction zone occupies more space. Every description we use refers to effects, not causes. And yet we keep treating fire as the cause. That confusion shows up in the way people talk about heat. Heat feels like a substance. It flows, it accumulates. You can trap it, you can lose it. That makes it feel like a thing. But heat isn't a thing either. Heat is motion, specifically. It's the chaotic motion of atoms and molecules. Faster motion means higher temperature. Slower motion means lower temperature. Fire doesn't contain heat Fire creates faster motion, which then spreads outward into everything it touches. That's why fire doesn't need to reach you to burn you. The energy moves faster than the reaction itself. The flame stays here. The heat races ahead. And that's why standing near a fire feels different from touching it. When you touch a flame, you're placing your atoms directly into the reaction zone. The energy transfer becomes violent and immediate. Chemical bonds in your skin don't stand a chance. It's not the fire attacking you, it's physics being indifferent. Once you understand that, fire stops being mystical and starts being brutally honest. It does exactly what the equations say it should do. No more, no less. It releases energy when atoms fall into more stable arrangements. And that energy doesn't care what happens next. Light doesn't care where it lands. Heat doesn't care what it excites. Motion doesn't care what breaks. Fire isn't alive. It doesn't want anything. It's just a visible consequence of the universe doing what it always does, moving from less stable to more stable configurations as efficiently as possible. And that brings us to the part people rarely think about. If fire is just energy escaping, if light and heat are just byproducts, then why does fire feel directional? Why does it climb? Why does it seem to reach upward as if it knows where to go? That question leads us straight into the role of air, gravity, and a very deep misunderstanding about how flames move at all. Why fire rises and why that's misleading. Watch a flame, and it always does the same thing. It climbs. That feels natural, almost intentional, as if fire prefers to go upward. People even say it that way. The flame rises. But that sentence quietly sneaks in a false idea. Fire doesn't rise. The flame is just along for the ride. When the reaction releases energy, the nearby air heats up. Hot air expands. Expanded air becomes less dense. Less dense air gets pushed upward by the colder, heavier around it. That upward motion pulls fresh oxygen in from below, feeding the reaction. The reaction releases more energy, heating more air, strengthening the flow. The flame stretches upward not because it wants to go there, but because the physics of fluids leaves it no other choice. If gravity didn't exist, fire wouldn't look like fire at all. In microgravity, flames become small, dim, and spherical. No rising plume, no dancing tongue of light, just a quiet, symmetrical glow where the reaction barely sustains itself. That alone should tell you something important. The shape of fire is not a property of fire. It's a property of its environment. We mistake the motion of heated air for the motion of the reaction itself. That's another example of confusing the process with the effect. And this misunderstanding goes deeper, because once you think fire rises on its own, you start attributing behavior to it. You start talking about it like it's alive, hungry, aggressive, but fire has no direction. Energy spreads in all directions equally. The only reason it looks directional is because gravity breaks the symmetry. Remove gravity, and the drama disappears. Now here's the unsettling part. The most dangerous thing about fire isn't the flame you see. It's the invisible movement of energy and gases around it. Hot gases rise quickly, pulling in oxygen-rich air at the base. That airflow can bend flames sideways, stretch them across surfaces, and spread reactions into places you never expected. Fire doesn't chase fuel. Air delivers it. This is why fires behave so unpredictably in buildings. Hallways become chimneys. Stairwells become engines. Openings that seem harmless suddenly accelerate everything. The flame isn't making decisions. The air is, and yet, when things go wrong, people blame the fire. They say it jumped, they say it spread, they say it escaped. But nothing escaped. The system simply followed the rules. Energy flowed, air moved. Reactions followed the oxygen. And here's where the misunderstanding becomes dangerous. If you think fire is a thing that rises, you'll fight it the wrong way. You'll focus on the flames instead of the airflow. You'll look at brightness instead of temperature. You'll underestimate heat that hasn't revealed itself yet. Because again, what you see is not what matters most. Fire is not where the light is brightest. Fire is where atoms are rearranging fast enough to sustain the chain. Everything else is just evidence. And once you grasp that, another strange realization hits you. Fire doesn't move through space the way a ball moves. It propagates like a rumor, like a wave, like a pattern. The atoms that burn at one moment are not the same atoms burning the next. The reaction marches forward by igniting new regions, leaving transformed matter behind. Nothing travels, the process does, which means fire has no memory, no persistence, no identity. It exists only in the present moment, constantly replacing itself. And that brings us to the final uncomfortable idea. If fire isn't a thing, if it doesn't move, rise, or consume in the way we imagine, then why does it feel so fundamental? Why does it sit at the center of our technology, our history, and even our own metabolism? To answer that, we have to zoom out, way out, and look at fire not as a curiosity, but as a special case of something much larger. Fire is the universe letting go. Here's the part that usually surprises people. Fire isn't rare. It isn't exotic. It isn't even particularly important by itself. What's important is what fire represents. Every time a flame appears, the universe is doing something it does everywhere. All the time it's moving toward a more stable arrangement. That's it. No drama, no intention, no mystery. Fire is just a fast, visible way for energy to slide downhill. The fuel and the oxygen start in a higher energy configuration. They're perfectly allowed to exist that way, but they're not at the lowest possible energy. There's a better deal available. Once a spark nudges the system past a barrier, the atoms take it. They rearrange into molecules that bind more tightly. The excess energy has to go somewhere, so it escapes as motion, light, and heat. That escape is what you call fire. If the same rearrangement happens slowly, you'd never notice it. No flame, no glow, no warmth. Just quiet chemistry. Rust is iron burning patiently. Digestion is food burning under supervision. Your body heat is fire with rules. The difference isn't what is happening. It's how fast it happens. Fire is what you get when the release is too rapid to hide. And once you see that, something clicks. Fire doesn't belong to chemistry. Chemistry belongs to fire. Or more accurately, they both belong to thermodynamics. The relentless tendency for energy to spread out, for differences to flatten, for possibilities to narrow. Fire is entropy announcing itself loudly. That's why it feels ancient, why it feels fundamental, why humans noticed it long before they understood anything else about nature. We weren't discovering fire. We were noticing energy flow for the first time. And that discovery changed everything. Cooking, metallurgy, engines, electricity, all of it is built on controlled fire. On slowing it down, speeding it up, confining it, redirecting it. Every technological advance is just a clever way of telling energy where it's allowed to go. Even now, when you flip a switch, you're not summoning electricity. You're opening a path for energy to fall. Fire taught us that lesson first. And here's the quiet, unsettling thought to end on. Fire feels alive because life is doing the same thing. Life is a structure that exists to accelerate energy dissipation while pretending to resist it. Cells, metabolism, ecosystems. They're elaborate ways of letting energy flow downhill without collapsing immediately. Life doesn't fight entropy, it surfs it. Fire just does it honestly. No regulation, no memory, no delay. So the next time you look at a flame, don't think of it as a thing. Think of it as a moment. A brief alignment of conditions that allows the universe to relax a little more than it did a second ago. And when those conditions vanish, the fire doesn't go anywhere. It simply stops happening.